My name is Guy Alberghini. This is a broadcast of the United States Constitution. Each broadcast will cover a very small section of the Constitution, policies that are going against that section of the Constitution, as well as possible solution or solutions. If you just go along with the bad policies, then you agree with them. And if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Hi, welcome back to the broadcast. My name's Guy Alberghini. In 1787, as Benjamin Franklin excited the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, a woman, reportedly Elizabeth Willing Powell, asked him, "Well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" His quick, sharp reply was, "A republic, if you can keep it." What has been changing the past many decades, and seems like it's changing quicker and quicker. Not too long ago was the spirit of 1976. This year is the spirit of 2026. What are you doing to get the republic back? And since it's the spirit of 2026, we have a returning guest from the LaRouche Organization and Schiller Institute, Lynne Speed. Lynne, welcome back.
Guy, thank you very much. It's very good to be back. And one of the things that I've done since the last time I was on the program, which I think was just a little over a year ago, of course, at that point, we were celebrating the 250th anniversary of Lexington and Concord and Bunker Hill. And now, basically 15 months after those occurrences 250 years ago, we're in a process now in these months of 250th anniversary of rather detailed preparations for the, I'm not even going to say the final break, but the break which has already occurred earlier being put, in fact, into words, very beautiful words in the form of the Declaration of Independence. And it was really looking at these events over the last year and a half that inspired me to do something at the end of last year, which was to put together a calendar actually honoring, or put it differently, to tell the true story of the American Revolution. I don't think that this breakthrough, this momentous creation, which has been referred to people like Sukharnov at the non-aligned movement in 1955, the first anti-imperial, anti-oligarchical, successful revolution in history. And though our nation is very young, we actually have the oldest constitutional republic in history. Just for example, people may not even be aware of this. Great Britain does not have a written constitution. Yes, it's an oligarchy and so on, but there's no written constitution. So what we did, flawed as it was, and we are by no means going to sweep over those flaws, but as Guy just mentioned, Franklin and the other founders at the Constitutional Convention and through that entire process sought to put together not a perfect nation, but the most perfect, as was said several times, that could be achieved at that moment, a perfecting nation. And our job here and now is to make sure that that process of continuing perfection, our that process of getting to the core principles of what's in the Declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and all women, all people, as the Pope recently put it, are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I want to say now that I think that people should, many people know that passage, though you'd be surprised at the number of people who don't know it, particularly young people. They're not taught these ideas in school anymore. But these principles are complete and noble. The practice of them may have been, in fact, indeed was very imperfect. But it was around this idea of creating a culture in which those principles, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all mankind, not just everybody in America, but in fact, all of mankind being equal and having an opportunity to be uplifted. That was the notion which inspired and brought in many, many people from very, very different backgrounds. And what I decided to do, actually, based on having looked at this history, as I said, over several months, was to put together, and I apologize that I don't have, and I don't know how clear this is going to be. Yeah, I got to hold that for a moment in front of my face, but I put together a commemorative calendar, and really not a commemorative calendar, but something which is, my husband calls it a book masquerading as a calendar, to put together something that would not just chronologue, but inspire, give people a sense each day of what was occurring during 250 years ago, and also the seminal events like the Battle of Lexington and Concord and Bunker Hill that occurred before and also after the Revolution. And you see on the bottom of there, I quote Franklin, "A republic if you can keep it." Now I have as the leading picture here on the cover one of my favorite paintings, which is by Emanuel Leutze, a German American, and they were trying at that point in the 1840s, 50s to replicate what had in Europe, what had occurred in the United States, to create a republic. And he did this amazing painting, which was actually used very prominently. It was brought to the United States. He executed in Germany. It hangs now in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And of course, it's the famous Washington crossing the Delaware. Now, what most people do not know, and again, I just would recommend that people, and maybe when we actually have this up, we can insert a slide. But what people are not aware of is that this picture actually captures the essence of, or the character rather, of Washington's army and the unity of people being pulled together from all walks of life. And right here, and again, we're not going to see it very well, but here is a Black American. He's in the bow of the boat, and he's a member of the Marblehead Fishermen, which is headed up by Colonel Glover. Glover from Marblehead operated a lot of fleets of fishing fleets, and people who were part of his fleets were chosen for their courage, their intellect, and their ability to work together. They weren't chosen because they had a certain, born with a spoon in their mouth, or they had a certain pedigree or certain skin color and so on. So he had a very, very integrated unit. In fact, many of the fishing units in New England, the whaling units were integrated. In the case of Marblehead, they were about 1/3 Black Americans or Native Americans. And there are many other people in this picture. There's a right here, if we can see it, there's a Scottish American. He's got a Balmoral hat. There's a Western countryman at the very front of the boat. At the rear of the boat, in the stern, also steering, very important function of steering the boat, is a Native American, which you can see, put a little bit closer. He's got their moccasins. You can see the features. Right next to him, if you see the person in the red there, that's an androgynous figure, possibly a woman. Next to her in the black oilskin cap, that's probably a rich merchant, maybe a plantation owner. Next to him is some Western Pennsylvania farmers, perhaps abolitionists. So you've got everybody. You've got free Blacks. You've had enslaved Black Americans. You had Native Americans. You had women. And all of these people played an indispensable part in the revolution. Why? Because these principles were people, everybody, no matter what their background was, were struggling for something which they knew was better in themselves and in other people. And that was actually the work, the way that John Adams put it. He said that was the real revolution. The revolution was in the change in the hearts and the minds of the population. He said the war, that's no part of the revolution. That was just an effect. That was a consequence of what had been a change in the mindset and the outlook of the population. And that was fairly universal. So what I did in the calendar is I wanted to highlight some of these different individuals, and many individuals that people don't know very much about and should know about. And I think if they were aware of it, it would give us a different sense of what our responsibility is today. So I'll start actually with someone who should be much better known, and we're going to try to endeavor to make sure that that happens. This is what you see on the person sitting down on, I'll put it that way because I don't know whether it's on the right or the left of your screen, is a man by the name of Gouverneur Morris. We don't have an interactive program here, so I can't ask how many people know or have ever heard of Gouverneur Morris, but he is to the Constitution of the United States what Thomas Jefferson is to the Declaration of Independence. In other words, he's the author of the preamble to and to the bulk. He pulls together what has been several months of deliberation into and frames the significant words, we the people. So the reason that the original intention was to say we the state of New York and the state of Virginia and the state of Massachusetts and the state of Pennsylvania. And he made this we the people, the concept which had been developing over time of a United States of America. Why don't people know about Gouverneur Morris? Well, he spoke more times than any of the other participants in the Constitutional Convention, 173 times on the floor of the convention. Many of his speeches, in fact, most of them were fervent attacks against the institution of slavery. How many people know that? In fact, there's been, I saw a book recently that said, oh yes, and the Morris family estate, had slaves. Well, Gouverneur Morris broke with his mom. He actually broke with some of the people in his household, not all of them, but it was divided, like the Civil War. But he was vehemently against slavery. Very good friends of Alexander Hamilton, and he, together with Robert Morris, were central, and that's Robert Morris pictured with him in the picture that I held up. They were central to saving the early republic, of saving the United States immediately following the Treaty of Paris and the ending of the war through the Constitutional Convention, and then subsequently. They were the network that suggested that Alexander Hamilton become the first Secretary of Treasury of the United States. He also laid out the street grid for Manhattan. He was the ambassador to France, and there's probably much, much more we could say about him, but that's someone that people should come to know. His family home is in the South Bronx. So if you hear of Morrisania or Morristown or Fort Morris, all of these things come from Gouverneur Morris and the Morris family. South Bronx happens to be also the poorest district, one of the poorest districts in the country. It's also the district in which our good friend and colleague Jose Vega, who's running a very intense campaign for Congress, is from. So find out more about Gouverneur Morris. I want to also now take up what will be a much more somebody that people do know, but is quite a controversial figure. But I want to talk about him in a little bit of a different way, perhaps than normal, which is George Washington. And of course, everybody knows George Washington had slaves. In fact, pictured in this painting by William Trumbull, you will see here it with the red turban on is George Washington's valet servant, and yes, he was enslaved, William Lee. But the relationship was a much different relationship than that of a slave master and slave. William Lee, like Washington, was a great equestrian. In fact, Washington was famous as being one of the best horse riders that lived. The only person that's reputed to be able to keep up with him was Billy Lee. And he was with Washington from the period of the French Indian Wars. So you're talking about the 1750s, 754, etc., straight through, entirely through the American Revolution. So you have to imagine that this entire period of the Revolution, Billy Lee is by Washington's side, being shot at and everything else. But even more, Billy Lee is not just setting out Washington's clothes and, shining his boots or something. He was the one person trusted. He functioned almost like an aide to camp, trusted to deliver important messages from deliberations that were going on with the Continental Army. And he was very, very well known to everybody involved in the Continental Army. In fact, the General Marquis Lafayette, when he returns to the United States for the 50th anniversary of the Revolution, one of the first people he goes to visit is Billy Lee in Mount Vernon. Washington, of course, freed all of his ordered that his slaves be freed at his death, or at his wife's death. that was in his will, and that the young people be educated and so on. A lot of people say, well, it wasn't everybody. Well, it was everybody that was in his power to free. Many of them were what you call dower slaves. They didn't belong to him or Martha. They belonged to the estate. Billy Lee, however, was manumitted immediately. But there's more complexities to that also featured, and this is just one of the pages of this calendar that I did. And you'll see here a picture that hopefully some people will recognize. This is Phyllis Wheatley. She was the classical poet. She was brought to the United States when she was 7 years old. She was a child prodigy, rapidly learned English, Greek, and Latin, and she wrote classical poetry. She writes a beautiful poem in 1775. She's 19 years old, to General Washington, entitled To His Excellency Washington. George Washington writes back to her and arranges to have her poem published, and in fact invites her to his headquarters to meet with him, and so on. And then also featured here is Washington's two of his aides de camp. That's, of course, Washington together with Lafayette and Alexander Hamilton, both of whom are vehemently anti-slavery and had a series of discussions with Washington about that over their many dinner meetings. You also have Colonel Glover, who I already mentioned, who Glover insisted, okay, if you're going to have my unit, and this is the unit that saved Washington's army, not just crossing the Delaware, but also earlier at the Battle of Brooklyn, or the Battle of Long Island, rode the army when it was surrounded by the British at Brooklyn over across the East River to safety in Manhattan in the middle of the night. And Colonel Glover insisted that the same ranking, the same divisions, that blacks be part of the units, and so on. So when you had Lexington and Concord, those early battles, in fact, about the first battles of the American Revolution were composed about 20-25% of the Continental Army at that time were Black Americans, Native Americans, and so on, and many, many other units also in New England. And some of that's beautifully depicted well, here's just another painting if people are able to see it. This is the Battle of Bunker Hill by John Trumbull, aide to camp, in fact, chief of staff for Washington for a while. And if you look closely, or again, you can get a copy of this on the internet, you'll see that 6 out of about 30 of the people featured there are Black Americans, and they're put in the picture precisely because they are there. So this was a international effort to create a republic. This is how it was captured. This is the back page of the calendar. This is how it's captured by a French general at the Battle of Yorktown. So people of all very, very different people were able to combine for a cause, for a higher purpose. And that is, in fact, what people have to do now. And that's what, of course, people are finding it difficult to do. We need to combine to create what Helga has referred to, and in a different way, the Pope recently, to create a Republican culture. I mean, republic with a small r, a culture in which the essence is to create a society in which that upholds these principles of people being able to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not pleasure, but happiness, meaning the ability to do good for others, to uplift and to develop the society. So I think we're close to the end. I don't know, Guy, if you have any questions or comments. I have a lot more that I could say, but let's leave it at that.
We could do another broadcast for like the second half at some point.
Yeah.
This is a good starting point for people to do research. I Googled Phyllis Wheatley and I'm going to be going over her poems in the near future. To the audience watching, there's a lot to do to take the Republic back. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. If you just go along with the bad policies, you agree with them. Lynn, thank you for being here again.
Thank you. And read the Declaration of Independence. Everyone should do that a couple times.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching this broadcast. As it says at the beginning of the preamble, we the people. That's you, that's myself. Are you part of the solution or part of the problem? One way to tell is if you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. So call, email, meet with your reps and senators, local leaders, tell them what they should be doing. They govern with the consent of the governed, and if you don't tell them what to do, it's implied that you agree with them and they're doing what you want them to do. So thank you very much again, and look forward to seeing you during the next broadcast.